So in last live session, we have created some basic, store implementation. So inside that, this was the folder what we have created. So when we talk about NGRX, after installing the packages, what we have done is first we have created action. So action is nothing but like if you have created a state, what kind of operation you are going to do with that particular state. So we have created a counter, right? So in action, you can see here we have created two action. So actions are nothing but just a way to uniquely identify something. Okay. So here we have said incremental counter, then decrement counter. So let's consider we have a counter state and what operation we can do, either increment or decrement. So first step, we have to create the action. And here you have to import the create action method from your NGRX store. So it's just a normal constant, right? Whatever the name you feel, you can give it create action and the some what do we say name you have to give. Okay. So create action, counter incremented, decrement counter, just like that. So I have created two action, increment counter and increment decrement counter. Once you create the action, then we have to go for the reducer. Next step. Okay. Now, reducer is the actual place where we interact with the state, do modify or something. We initialize the state, we modify the state and everything. Okay. So reducer is the actual place where we do the modification with our state. So here you can see I have just created an interface and this is my initial state. So export const my state name, counter state, the data type, instead of making it an any, I have created this interface. And in my state or what we can say store, I just have a one state, that is count, which is having data type number. So here you can see I have created an initial state. Now this is my reducer. So again, everything you will be saying is export const, because this we are going to use in another file, just like module. Okay. So in reducer, we have to create reducer. So in action, it was create action because we were creating action. Now in case of reducer, it is create reducer. So for create reducer, we have to first pass the initial state. So here you can see counter state means we have to provide the initial state. So initial state, initial count, this state we have created. Then what number of actions I have? So in actions, we have created two actions, increment and the decrement. So here we have to implement those on increment action. Means if we are trying to increment it, so if this action is going to be executed, so what we have to do? From our state, we are going to increment the count. So this is the initial state. Inside that we have a count variable, right? So this property we are going to increment it in this action. In case of decrement, we are reducing it -1. So reducer is a place we have actually incrementing and decrement, means actual logic we will be writing it over here. Action, reducer, then we have selector. So selector is to read the data from the store. Okay. So action is like what kind of operation we are going to do with the state. Then reducer is a place where we will actually write the code to interact with the state, means whatever the modification we are going to do with the state. Then we have selector. Selector is a place where we write the code to read the data from the store, like which state I'm going to read, because over here you can have multiple state also. Let's say logged user something. Okay, just like that in this state we can store multiple data. So just like that, what state from your state, what data you are going to need, so that you will be creating over here. So selector is to read the data from your state. So this is how you create. So first you get the instance of the particular state, then you create the selector like this. And whatever the state you selected, that you pass it over here, and from that what you are getting, count. Okay. Now, so this is the store implementation. Then we have app state. So in app state, like we have just created our interface, what we are going to have. Okay. Now these are the files. So action, reducer, and the selector. Once you create all these files, we need to register it also somewhere on the global level. So we have created the older version of the application. So here we have app module. So in app module, in import, we have added store module and for root with empty braces, because we didn't added that use effect and everything. So this was the implementation we have done. And in provider, we have to register our store, and whatever the reducer we have done, that we need to register over here. Name counter. So this counter name we have given over here. Where is that action? State. Yeah. So in state, we have provided our name of the state counter. So this we have to provide it over here. And for this state, what is the reducer? This reducer. Okay. So if I go to definition, it is going over here. So these are the basic files. 3 files, action, reducer state, and our state. Okay. Like how many variables I'm going to have in my state, how many state. Okay. Then this we have registered over here. Then how do we interact with the state? So in app component, we have to first create the instance of our store service. So here you can see in constructor, we have created instance of store service like this. Then we have created two buttons, increment and the decrement. Okay. On click of increment, what we have done, we have to make use of the dispatch method. And what we are going to dispatch? Our action. So increment counter, this is nothing but our action. See, from which file we are getting? From action. So we are trying to execute that particular action. So once we execute this action, it will come to this reducer. What is the action? Whatever the action we have passed, respective that method reducer will execute. So if we pass this action, this logic will get triggered. And if we pass decrement, this logic will get triggered. Okay. And to read the data, we have created selector, correct? So now this selector we are subscribing to it. Okay. So this dot store select. What select? In the select count. Now this select count is coming from over here. This. Okay. We have created our selector. Selector name was select count. So this we are passing it over here. So from store, we are trying to read this selector. And whatever the data we get, that we are storing in an observable, because this is going to constantly change. Whenever store value get changed, new value we will be able to subscribe from over here. And this we are dynamically subscribing in the HTML. So now if we see in the action, let's save everything. So if I click, so this value, we are getting it from the store. Okay. So on click of increment and decrement, we are actually incrementing the state value from our store. This is the basic implementation. Okay. Now we don't use this, right? Because in actual application, we need to store the data which is repeated. Like let's say you logged into an application and in all your pages, some drop down data like rules or some data which is going to be needed in all the pages. So unnecessary calling that API in all the pages, unnecessary calling the data in all the pages, unnecessary calling API in all the pages or in all the component, we store the data into our store. So we will reduce the API call because master kind of data is not going to change on a daily basis, right? At least when user logged in, let's say we have a session of 30 minutes, it's not going to change. City list, the state list, or let's say roles, this kind of data is not going to change very frequently. So this type of data we can store in a state. So rather than making API call in all the component, we will read the data from the store. Okay. So just to try to means we have created a state and we have incremented that also. But how do we do the same thing in case of API call? Let's say we have a user list API and we call that user list on a page. And if we navigate to another page also, and there also we need the user list. So again, instead of making the API call, we will read the data from the store. This kind of thing we will try to implement. What is the change over here? Nothing, no? Let's undo this. So let me just delete the empty folder. I was practicing in the same thing. Employee, let's delete. Service, let's delete. This store, store to user component and user list component. Fine. Now, so this store folder I will keep as it is. Now, parallelly, we will create another store folder. So I will name it as store2. Okay. Now, just like how we followed in store, what is the first thing we have to do whenever we have to implement the NGRX? first thing we have to do is we have to create the action, correct? So in this store to folder also, first we will create the action. So let's give it as a name as data dot action dot ts. Okay. Now in this data dot action dot ts, how we did that? We need to import this create action first. Let's import it. Let's open side by side. Okay. Now what we need to do over here, we need to create the action. Let's say we are going to create a state, and in that state, we are going to store the user list. Okay, user data, and that data we are going to get from the API. So whenever we are dealing with the API call and we have to store the data we are getting from the API call into our NGRX store. So this is a normal action, right? For this action, we are not passing the data. But what if we have to store some data into our NGRX store, and while storing, we need to pass the data also. So action will be little bit different. So here you can see it was a normal action. We were not passing any data. Okay. But now if we have to pass the data, so how we do that? So export const, first we'll, let's say, load data is equal to create action. And I will name it as data load. Okay. First action I have created. Export const. Now, when we make the API call, there are three things. First, API call can be success or it can be error, right? So whenever we are writing NGRX code for the API, so we have to implement all these three. Means in case of success, in case of failure. Okay. So now I'm doing it for the success. So load data success. Okay. Is equal to create action round bracket. Now here, what we need to do, we are going to have the data also, right? So first parameter will be just like the data, what we created earlier, load data success. Then second parameter will be properties. Okay. So like what kind of data you are, because you are going to pass the data, right? So you need to pass the properties. Let's say you are creating an action, but while calling that action, you are going to pass the data also. So this is how you are going to pass, like using props. Okay. Why it is not closing? So props, angle brackets, curly bracket, data, colon any. Okay. So this is your normal action without any parameter. This is your action with parameter. So while calling this action, load a data success, you can pass the data also. Okay. So this is for success, just like that. Let me just copy paste now. I will answer your question once. Let me just complete the writing because so many things we have to write. Then I will again explain. And this will be error. And here instead of data, it will be error or something. Fine. So we have created our action. So you can just pay attention, like this was the normal action where we don't have any parameter. This is an action with parameter. Okay. This is a normal action to read the data. And this is action where we are going to set it. This is action which we will trigger in case of error in catch block. Fine. Let's close. So we have created action. After action, we have to create the reducer. So let's create the reducer now. Data dot reducer dot ts. Let's open this right side. Just a minute. So we need this import. Let's copy. Now, so here we have to create the interface, like what kind of data in the state we are going to have. So just like we have created here our count, right? So just like that, export interface. Let's name it as data state curly bracket. So how many things we are going to have is like data. Then whenever we make the API call, we can store like loading. In case of error, we can store the error also, right? So normally whenever we write the API call, we create three properties. Let's say data, it will be with any. I'm not creating database interface for user object. Then let's say loading we can skip, or let's write it as well. Loading will have boolean and then error. Again, it is any. So we have just created an interface. After interface, we need to create the initial state. So just like here we have say, we have initialized our state, and this initial state we have to pass to the reducer. Whenever reducer instantiate, this will instantiate with the initial state, whatever we provide. Correct? So here export const initial state is equal to, it will be having data type of data state, the instance we create. Curly bracket, data, let's say we will initialize with null, then loading with initialize with false, and error again with null we can initialize. Okay, so we have created our initial state. Now we have to create our reducer. So export const reducer. Let's name it is a data reducer. So data reducer, create reducer, round bracket. Then first option will be our initial state. So this is our initial state. Then how many actions we have, that many on method will be implemented, right? So on first, now here we need to provide the action. So now what was the action name? We have given load data. Okay. So load data, this is our first action. Now we need the import for that. So load data, let's import the remaining also. Three actions we have created. So three also we have imported. Load action, load data. In case of action, we have created three action, mean three option, operations we are going to perform with our state. So first is load data. So here we are going to get the existing state, arrow. Okay. Let something load data, then round bracket this, arrow operator, round bracket, then curly bracket. So we need to get the existing state by using spread operator. Then what we can do, loading and the error we have, right? So loading, we can make it as true. Then error will make it as null. Okay. So this is in case of our load data. Then second, on our second action will be load data success. First, we will implement this, comma, state. Now, so here if you see this action doesn't have any parameter, but this action has a parameter. We are going to get the data also. So here it will be state, and we are going to get the data, right? So in object format, we will write the data. Then arrow operator, curly bracket, sorry, round bracket and curly bracket. Then existing state, comma, data, and loading false. Once we get the data, we will make that loading state as false. Then just like that, we will have the error block as well. Let's copy. In case instead of this, now it will be for failure. So whatever the action we have created, we are creating reducers for that. And in case of load, in case of our failure action, we had the error, right? Spelling mistake was there. Error. So we will get it over here. Same, we have to pass it over here and loading false. So this is how we create the reducers for our three actions. We have created action, then we have created reducer. Now we have to create the selector because we need to read the data also. So let's create the reducer now, selector now. Data selector.ts. Okay. Now here, let's open that also parallelly. So this was our previous selector. Let's copy this now. So now we have to create our selector. So obviously we have created three actions. So we have created three reducers also. In that reducer, we have created three on method to implement our action. Just like that, now we have to create the three selectors as well. So export constant. Now first we need to get the instance of our state. So select data state is equal to. Now we have to create the select our means how do we say that? In case of normal, we have just got the particular state from our state. We have just got the particular counter state, right? Now here, while storing the data into our store, we are going to store into a particular key. Okay. So now in case of API call, it will be something else because we are going to create the effect and everything. So we need some particular key. So to create that, let's use the method like create. Here we have a method just like create selector. One more will be create feature selector. Okay. Now we have to make use of this method, create feature selector. And the data set something name we have given now. In reducer data state. Let's close this now. We need the import. Why import it not suggesting? Reducer. Okay. So whatever the state we have created, that only we are accessing over here. Then over here, we need to provide the key. So let's name it as, I will just keep it as simple data. So this is like we have created an instance of our initial state. Okay. Then we have to create our selector. So export const. First will be to select the data. So select data is equal to create selector round bracket. So first is like select data state. Okay. Select data state, comma. Then we have to get our state, data type, data state. From that, dot data. So in that state, we had data error and the loading. So we are going to read the data only. Just like that, some round bracket is missing. Okay, semicolon. So this is to read the data. Just like that, we are storing three things into our state: data, error, and the loader, right? So select data, let's say instead of select loading, and here we will return loading, and here error, and here we will return error. Okay. So what we have done, we have created three selector because in the state we are going to store three type of data, right? Data, loading, and the error. So we have created three selector to read the particular item from the state. Let me just repeat once again. So first we have created action. So first action was the normal one, just to read the data. Second was because once API call was success, we need to send the data also to store to the reducer, right? So that's why we need a action with parameter. So this is how you create the action with parameter. You just have to add a second parameter like this. And one was for the data failure also. If API got failed, and that same thing, like what was the error, you need to store in the state. So you can do that also. So for that, we have created one this action, but this is optional. Okay. Let's say in case of success only, you are going to update the store. You don't need this action. So we have created two action. Then we have created reducer. So we have created three action actually, right? So just like that, we need to implement three reducers also. So here we have created our state, what kind of data we are going to store into our state, data, loading, and the true. So this loading, we normally use it when we have to get the status, like if API call is in progress or not. So in case of once we call the load data, we are making it true. Once we get the data, we are in case of success, and in case of error, we are making it false. So just to, it's again, it's optional. You can keep it or you can not also. Okay. So interface we have created, then we have created our initial state. Just like the counter, we are following the same. Then we have created our three reducers. We have passed the initial state to the create reducer function. Then whatever the actions we have, load data, load success, and the load failure. Okay. So here we have created the reducer. Then we have created our selector. Selector is to read the data from the state. So in our state, we have three types of data: data, loading, and the error block. So we have created select data, loading, and the error. So from the respective selector, we are returning some particular data from our state. Okay. So now these are the, what do we say, basic files we have created. Then next thing, we didn't created like this state. Here we had created, but here we forgot. In action we had that. Let's see where we are using this app state. Here we are not using. I think this state also we need to register in the app module. No, where we are using this app state. Let me just find out. Okay, got it. So here we were using that. No. In counter selector, and in our selector, what we have used, data state, where we have created that. Okay, this only we are using. Fine. So this is not needed. Okay, let's close everything. So in store to folder, we have created action, then reducer, and then selector. Now we have, next thing is like we have to create our service first, because we are going to make our API call from the service. So in app folder, let me create service folder. And inside service folder, I will create a service. Let's name it as data service data. And in this data service, we are going to keep our normal API call. So private HTTP HTTP client. Since we are making the API call, we need to have that provide HTTP client also. Anyone aware like that HTTP client module is deprecated now? You cannot use that. See over here, HTTP client module. It's deprecated. Okay. So doesn't matter if it is new project, new project architecture or old architecture. HTTP client module is deprecated in Angular 18. Fine. If you are going to make the API call, this is the only way you have to do. So we have created our service. In that, we will have a function get users. And from this, we are going to make our API call. This dot HTTP dot get API call. and normal our JSON placeholder API we will do JSON place users. So this API URL we will pass it over here. Okay. So this function is going to return the data type of observable. Now, whenever we, if it is a normal date, something state you have created and you are just going to, you have to, when you have to store the data, right? So now extra thing which you have to create is the effect. Okay. So now you have to create the effect. That is the new thing we have to create. So here data dot effect dot ts. Okay. Now I have that code already ready because it is so much of code. Let me just get that. Again, it's a service only. Let me just implement action and the data service. Load data success, and in case of failure, and data service import. Okay. What is the method name? Get users. Okay. So this is our effect. So whenever first time you are going to make the API call in your application page, let's say user data, you are going to need in all the pages. So there will be at least one page which will be, let's say on the dashboard. So in the dashboard, what you will do, you will call this effect so that inside this effect, we are calling our API call and whatever the data we get. So remember like in counter state, how do we update? By using this dispatch method and we pass the action. Now in case of data effect, you can see once we get the data, we are calling this action load data success, and we are passing the object data, whatever the data we get from this API call function. Okay. And in case of error also, see, we are calling the another action that is load data failure, and we are passing the error, whatever the error we get. So this is where we are using our actions. Okay. Now, the fourth file we have created, that is effect. Now, these files we have to register into our app module also. The app module. So in case of effect, now we have to remove this, I think. Let me see if I have written that. I didn't read that. Just a second. So we will remove this from over here, and in store module for root, now we have to provide the data, the key what we have given. So in reducer, sorry, in selector, while I said like we have to provide something key, right? So here we have said like data. Now this same key we have to pass it over here also, data, and here we have to pass the reducer. So our name is data reducer. Okay. So we have passed our data reducer over here. This reducer we have passed into our app module. Okay. So this is extra thing whenever we are doing with the API call. So we have to do this thing. In case of normal state and you are just incrementing and decrementing, you don't need to register that. But in case of data, when you are just going to store the data in case updating it, you need to do like this. Then we need to register our effect module also. So let's first import the effect module. Ngrx effect. Let's copy effects, effect module, then effect module dot for root, and we have to pass our effect module. So our effect module name was data effect. So this will go over here. Let's add the import. Okay. So basic thing I think done. Let's try now. So store implementation is done. Store we have registered into our app module as well. Effects also we have registered. Now we will create some components. So components. Let's create ng generate component. Let's create employee. And one more component that will be user. Okay, so we have created two components. Now, once we land to the user page, we will call our API. Okay, and in employee page, once we call the API, we will store the data into the store. And in employee page, without making the API call, we will read the data from the store. Let's create the route also. Path user component, user component. That is suggesting to. Oh, user component is already there. Let me delete this. Just like that, one more route for employee. Employee component. Fine. Now, in user component, we will trigger our, what do we say? Effect to first time first time make the API call and get the data and store into the store. So once the component load over here, so this was the previous one, right? So instead of app state, we have to use our data set. State. Now over here, this dot store dot dispatch. Now to get the data, what was the action we created? Load data. This was just to trigger the action to get to initiate our API call. And we need to execute it. Fine. So in user component was the component load. We are calling our first action, that is load data. So load data, this action is the load data, and it will go to our reducer over here. Okay. And this reducer will actually call over here. Okay. And once we get the data, that data will get stored once that load data success, this will get triggered, right? So here you can see if we call the load data action, this will automatically trigger. So we are constantly looking for the action change. Here you can see it's like action is like a observable. What is the type of action you pass? So first is like of type load data. Once the load data type action get triggered, we are going to this merge map will execute. And in this merge map, what we are going to do? API call. Once we get the data, next action we are triggering, that is load data success. Whatever the data we get, that we are passing to this action. Even in case of error, we are calling this action along with the error also. So by doing this, we are storing the data into the state. Okay. So by just doing this, you are making your API call. You are calling the load data action, and load data action will by default call your API and will store the data. Okay. Now in your employee component, let's create an observable over here also. We will try to print the data in user component as well. So let's say user list, it is going to be observable any. Let's add undefined so that it won't be calling for initialization. And this we will print it in HTML. Async. And so this observable is there, right? So we need to subscribe to the selector. So I said like selector is a way by which we read the data, correct? So select data, this selector we are going to use. So we have created observable. Now this dot user list is equal to this dot store dot select. What we have created 3 selector. Out of that, with what we need to use, select data. Let's add the input. Okay. So by using this, we are trying to read the data from our store, and that whatever the data we have got, that is going to be stored over here, and that we are reading in the HTML. And same thing we will try to do in the employee also. Let's declare this. Constructor store data state. We don't need this, and the state. So in employees component, what we are going to do, we are just trying to read the data from the state. Okay. And that we will print it in over here. Let's try to save all. Do we have any error? No. Let's try now. Oh, yeah. Let's open the console. So currently no activated route is there. Let's navigate to user. What was the route name? User only. Something is wrong. Cannot read properties out undefined reading count. Okay. We need to remove that from HTML. That count thing we have done now. So I'm just commenting that for now. User component. Let's see. No. Why user component not loaded? I think. Okay. We did the navigation, but we didn't add the router outlet. So how it is going to render? Router outlet was missing. So now here you can see API call is made once we navigate to the user page, and whatever the data we have printed it also over here, because it's an array of objects. So it is printed like this. Okay. Now I'm just clearing it. And now if I navigate to the employee page, where is the route? Employee. And in employee page also, we have read the data from the store, and that we have printed it in the HTML. My data is not visible. Let's add the debugger. Process, employee component. Let's add a navigation because it is reloading. Over here, let's add anchor tag. Router link. We have to navigate user. Just like that, we need employee. Employee will go over here and user will go over here. Let's try now. Okay. So first, currently no route is activated. We are just having the app component. Now, if I navigate to the user, so on the user component, API call got made and data is also visible. Now I'm just clearing it. Now, if I navigate to the employee, so in employee also you are able to see the data. Okay. But now if I refresh, okay, and if I'm in the employee page, now that data is not visible because the user list API call from where we have triggered from the user component only. So if I again go to the user, API call is made. Let's clear it. And again, if I go to the employee, data is still visible. Let's just try to print it properly also. Then only it will make sense. So in employee, let's add ULLI. Star in G4. Let user of page. Here we will print just the username. Name. Let's save. Now, if I go to the user, API call will be done, data will be stored to the state. And now if I go to the employee, so see, employee names are visible. Let's do the same thing in our user component also. Here we will display name plus website also. User dot website. Let's clear it. So initially we don't have it, okay? Because we reload this, obviously store will get reinitialized. Now if I navigate it to the employee, okay, I am not able to see that ULLI. Now if I navigate to the user, in user page, actually we are triggering the API call. So now here you can see we are getting the data. Now if I navigate to the employee, here we can see the data without getting the API, without making the API call also, we are reading the data from the store. Okay. So just like that, let's say you have 50 component and in 50, all the component you are going to need this user data. So instead of making the API call, you will read the data from the store. Again, like to handle this kind of scenario, if we refresh and let's say we navigated to the employee page, but now data is not present in the store because we have written the code in such a way, like in the user component, we have triggered that. Again, we need to modify our code. We will check like if in the state we have the data or not. If not, from we will have some instead of making this currently what we have done in the user component, we have written this code. But instead of doing this, we will write this code into our service. And in the service, again, we will write the code. We will first check like if in the store we have the data or not. If not, we will make it. So we don't have to worry. We don't have to worry about the same code in all the component. We will use that service in all the component. So we will have this code in a common place. Okay. Let me just allow you unmute now. Then we can go for the question. Okay, you can unmute now. Was
हेलो
it
सर।
heavy? Yeah.
सर मैं पूछना चाहिए, जैसे आपने ये चार ही कंपोनेंट बनाए हुए हैं फॉर यहाँ पर स्टोर के अंदर।
Hmm.
तो ये अब सपोज दैट कि मेरे पास 20 पेज हैं और
Hmm.
20 पेजों में मैं इस डेटा को स्टोर करना चाह रहा हूँ। तो मैं उसका स्ट्रक्चर कैसे रखूंगा?
नहीं, पेजेस कितने भी रहे,
हाँ,
you will be storing the data into store. Okay. And
मतलब ये चार ही
हाँ,
टीएस फाइल रहेंगी। तो इसी
act-
के अंदर अब मैं मतलब लाइन एड ऑन करते रहूंगा।
हाँ, जैसे
अच्छा
देखो
अच्छा
हमने
अच्छा।
यहाँ पे
और
स्टेट, यहाँ पे हमने यहाँ पे क्या हमारा रिड्यूसर, यहाँ पे हमने क्या बोला कि मैं स्टेट में कौन सा डेटा स्टोर करना है, रू एक की, राइट। जैसे डेटा किया,
हाँ,
फिर लेट से एम्प्लॉय लिस्ट है, सिटी लिस्ट है।
अच्छा अच्छा अच्छा, हाँ ये पैरामीटर पास करते रहेंगे यहाँ पर।
एक स्टेट है, उसमें कितने भी टाइप का अलग अलग डेटा आप स्टोर कर सकोगे। ओके।
जैसे यहाँ पर जैसे 20 करेंगे, 20 जितना भी कर पाए यहाँ पर कर
हाँ,
देंगे उतना, यानी कि
सिटी लिस्ट।
हाँ।
ओके। जितना टाइप का डेटा आपको स्टेट में स्टोर करना है, यू विल बी कीप ऑन क्रिएटिंग इट जस्ट लाइक दैट। आपका एक्शन और ये सब वैसे वैसे चेंज होते जाएगा।
ये फिर सर आप ये एक्शन दोबारा लिखा जाएगा कि इसी में पैरामीटर पास करोगे?
नहीं, ये एक्शन हमने किसके लिए लिखा है,
हाँ ये लिखा
पर्टिकुलर
है
डेटा
डेटा।
के लिए, राइट। लेट
हाँ
से
तो
सिटी का
ये
डेटा स्टोर करना है तो आपका सिटी का अलग एक्शन रहेगा, स्टेट का अलग एक्शन
हाँ
रहेगा, लॉग्ड इन
तो
यूजर
ये
का
मतलब
अलग
लाइन ऑफ
एक्शन।
कोड, लाइन ऑफ
फाइल
कोड
एक ही
बढ़ता रहेगा
रहेगी,
यहाँ पर।
एक्शन एक ही जगह
अच्छा
जाएंगे
अच्छा
सारे। ओके।
अच्छा 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 अच्छा। हाँ ठीक समझिए। और सर जैसे ये आपने स्टोर बनाया, तो ये आपने एक स्ट्रक्चर बताया था आर्किटेक्चर,
हम्म।
तो वो आपने कोर के अंदर बताया, तो ये कोर के अंदर जाएगा?
कोड के
ये
अंदर मतलब?
आपने मतलब जैसे आपने जब स्ट्रक्चर बताया था कुछ दिन पहले,
हम्म।
आर्किटेक्चर बताया था, प्रोजेक्ट का आर्किटेक्चर कैसा होना चाहिए, तो आपने कोर,
हाँ,
पेज
कोर में
और
जाएगा,
इस।
कोर में जाएगा ये।
अच्छा 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 अच्छा।
ओके।
ठीक सर। और सर जैसे मान लो आपने अभी ये मॉड्यूल बेस बताया है,
हम्म।
अब मैं 18 में स्टैंडअलोन यूज कर रहा हूँ, तो आपने जैसे रजिस्टर किया है उसमें मॉड्यूल में, तो मुझे हर एक कंपोनेंट में रजिस्टर करना पड़ेगा जाके?
नहीं, वो मुझे भी देखना है 18 में कैसा, मैंने भी नहीं देखा अभी तक। 18 में मैं देखूंगा, फिर देख बताऊंगा मैं।
अच्छा अच्छा सर सर।
ओके।
हाँ
एनीवन इज
सर
अवेयर
ठीक
लाइक 18 हाउ डू वी डू दैट? Because in every component we can't be doing this. Might be in the provider we have to register the same thing, whatever do we are doing in the import statement over here. In 18 we have providers, so in provider might be we might be doing this. Okay. I will also check. It will be a small thing only because remaining code is same. Doesn't matter what version you have. This code will be
है।
same. Okay. Just
सेम है।
we don't have
बर-
app model over there,
अरे,
so something will be different.
हम्म, ओके।
Okay. Anyone else has any question? I know it's not an easy thing. By looking at it, you will be getting it on the first time only, because in my project also I don't have it, means I have it but we don't use it, so we don't get that hands-on experience, because occasionally we write it. Okay. But just for interview preparation, like how basic things, like these are the things everyone is going to ask. So if you have this example ready with you, you will have basic key, like what are the terms we have in case of NGRX. So even if you answer these things also, it is pretty good enough, because no one is going to into deep. Because half an hour, how much they are going to ask? They just want to see your confidence, like whether you are comfortable with NGRX store or not. Okay. So if you implement this in a single go also now, then it will be enough. You will be confident to explain in the interview. Okay. Anyone else has any question? Okay, I will be pushing this code. So just try to implement the same. At least make sure you have working example with you, so that not now or in the, let's say,
सर
current or
सर
project you might
सर
be
एक और
needing it. Yeah.
सर एक क्वेश्चन है कि सर जैसे आप जैसे मान लो मेरे पास 10 पेज हैं, मैंने
Hmm.
10 पेज पर इधर उधर गया और मैंने डेटा को स्टोर कर दिया लोकल इसी में, ठीक
Hmm.
है। अब मैं डेटा जैसे सपोज दैट कि मुझे लेटेस्ट डेटा लाना है, तो उसके लिए मुझे कुछ रिफ्रेश
Select
करना पड़ेगा?
Selector. आप डेटा रीड कैसे करोगे? सिलेक्टर से।
अच्छा।
जब भी आपको डेटा रीड करना है, यूजिंग सिलेक्टर वी कैन सब्सक्राइब। ओके।
सर इसका मुझे समझ में नहीं आया था, ये इफेक्ट आपने जो लगाया ना, इफेक्ट का थोड़ा सा कंफ्यूजन है, इस जो एक डॉट डेटा डॉट इफेक्ट।
हाँ, तो ये मैंने बोला कि एपीआई कॉल के टाइम पे अपने को ये इफेक्ट लिखना पड़ता है। क्रिएट
अच्छा।
इफेक्ट बनाया हमने। फिर अगर एक्शन का टाइप लोड है, तो हम क्या कर रहे हैं, ये मर्ज मैप
हम्म,
एग्जीक्यूट कर रहे हैं, और मर्ज मैप में एपीआई कॉल किया, एपीआई कॉल का जैसे ही डेटा आया, हमने कौन सा एक्शन हिट किया, लोड सक्सेस, और उसको डेटा भेज दिया। अगर फेलियर है तो ये। ओके।
हाँ।
सो
तो
हर एक
ये
अपने
सब
स्टेट में
ये
अलग।
सब हम्म हम्म।
बोलो।
तो ये सारा सब पूरा कोड ये मुझे अब सर्विस में लिखना पड़ेगा जाके?
हाँ, नहीं, ये आपका अलग है ना। सर्विस सर्विस में आपका सिर्फ एपीआई कॉल है, ये देखो ना, ये कहाँ से आ रहा है, सर्विस में से। राइट।
हाँ।
सर्विस का कोड अलग है, यहाँ पे हम सिर्फ क्या कर रहे हैं,
नहीं
सर्विस में का फंक्शन कॉल करके अपनी अपनी एक्शन कॉल कर रहे हैं।
नहीं सर, आपने अभी बोला ना कि आप हर कंपोनेंट में लिखो जाके, इससे अच्छा सर्विस में लिखोगे जाके,
हाँ, तो
वो
ये
इसको
इफेक्ट,
डेटा।
नहीं नहीं, वो जो इफेक्ट मैंने
हाँ
बोला, कि जैसे हमने यूजर कंपोनेंट में सर्विस यूज इफेक्ट लोड डेटा वाला एक्शन कॉल किया। ओके। बट यहाँ पे
हाँ
हमको पहले
हाँ।
चेक करना पड़ेगा कि डेटा ऑलरेडी हमारा स्टोर पे है कि नहीं, एम्प्लॉय पेज में। तो
हाँ,
वो चीज़ हम, वो
हम्म।
कॉमन जो चीज़ रहेगी वो हम किसी सर्विस में रखेंगे, और वहाँ पे चेक करेंगे
अच्छा
कि स्टोर में डेटा है
हाँ
कि
हाँ।
नहीं। अगर नहीं है
अच्छा
तो फिर हमारा
अच्छा
स्टोर इफेक्ट कॉल कर देंगे।
अच्छा, कॉमन सर्विस उसकी बनेगी, मतलब
हाँ।
हर सर्विस में नहीं करेंगे?
नहीं, हर सर्विस में क्यों करेंगे?
अच्छा अच्छा अच्छा, हाँ ठीक है, ये कॉमन सर्विस का रहेगा, बिल्कुल सही कह रहे
ओके अशोक।
तो इसकी रिकॉर्डिंग भी सकती है क्या?
रिकॉर्डिंग? हाँ, मैं यूट्यूब पे डाल दूंगा इसकी।
अच्छा ठीक है
हाँ।
सर।
Let me just push the code. GRX code. So ये बहुत बेसिक कोड है. Okay. Try to have this example ready. इतना भी कर लोगे. Even if you implement this also, ना, it will be very sufficient. You will understand what is store, how you store the data into store, NGRX का implementation, what files we need. If you explain this also in the interview, that is very enough. Okay.
Yes, it's really helpful. Thank you so much.
Okay.
सर सर इसका यूआरएल मुझे यूट्यूब पर मिलेगा?
हाँ हाँ.
अच्छा अच्छा,
Okay.
यूट्यूब.
Fine all. Thank you.
थैंक यू सर. सर बहुत अच्छा पढ़ाते हो आप.